and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Welcome, young adventurers. Dylan here, and on today's podcast, I have Matt Chacon. He is the founder of Rumii, an award-winning VR platform for education and training, highlighted in the PBS documentary Good All Over for donating Rumii in the frontier economies and emerging markets for the immersive education. Author of the First Person, a book of the Metaverse, actively serves on the Human Dimension Support Service think tank and advising the U.S. government on spatial computing technologies, and co-inventor of FLOURET, a COVID-19 immersive mental health therapy, and the creator of 90-10 principle, monetize 90% of your day and donate 10% to other for social good. So without any delay, I'd like to welcome Matt. Hey!
Welcome, brother. Dylan. Hey, man. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on the show, dude. Glad to have you here. Excited to talk with you and all the things about the metaverse, as we've come to find out we have all been building for the last couple of years and not known it. So I'm excited to talk to you. Let's kick things off, though, a little bit about your journey. Can you talk to me a little bit about your journey and what led you up to Rumii and the metaverse and all that jazz?
Yeah, for sure. I'll be brief, and we can kind of dive into questions if needed. And by the way, I mean, feel free to, ask me anything. I'm an open book. I'm not going to be offended. I lost my pride when I started dating. So anything goes, man. Yeah. So I guess being pretty brief about the whole journey, grew up in poverty, couldn't afford college. Grew up in South Central Phoenix, Arizona. So instead of going to college, I started in 1994. I helped start an internet development firm. And we had nothing special. We had no secret sauce. We just built websites. But what we kind of specialized in was sports websites. So we did like the Phoenix Open, Arizona Rattlers, Arizona Diamondbacks. I personally built the very first website that Wells Fargo ever had. It was just me doing that. Crazy times back then. I mean, back when nobody even knew what a web browser was, back in the early 90s. So taught myself computer programming, did that. 3.5 years later, we had a $63 million IPO. And I've kind of been doing that ever since, man, just starting up companies, some successful, some failures, it's part of the journey. And that brought me to here. So before I started Rumii, I owned like a consultancy. We did a lot of Agile and Scrum consulting, and we used everything on the market: Zoom, Blue Jeans, Uber Conference, and they all sucked. So I needed something that was more immersive for my customers. And when I started looking around, I realized back in 2016, early 2016, that, hey, we've got technology, content, and talent kind of converging right now. And it was a perfect time to start this. And HTC was just coming out with their HMD, the Oculus DK1 had dropped. They're going to DK2. So started building on that. And then, the rest is history. Now, 5 years later, still own Rumii. So, and then along the way, I got 3 college degrees. So it's been a fun ride.
Three college. And what did you get the college degrees in?
So kind of along the way through that journey, when I could actually afford to go to college and pay for it myself without going hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt. I got a degree in counterintelligence from American Military University, then studied marketing at Rutgers Business School, and then mergers and acquisitions at Harvard Business School, where I finished up. So
that's a really intense background. Counterintelligence. And then, that sounds like a lot of kind of, like going into other countries, counterintelligence, like financial kind of stuff. That sounds like are you a spy? Are you a government spy? It's okay. You can tell me. No one's watching.
No one's watching.
No one knows. Okay. You can trust me. We're in space.
Perfect. If I've heard, I can't count the number of times I've heard "you can trust me," and it really means something completely different. That usually starts with an F and ends with a U. Yeah. But anyway, I could tell you what I did. I did tell you what I did, but I'd have to kill you. But the problem is, you'd die for a really boring reason.
Oh, don't do that. Nobody wants to die for a boring reason. That's there. We all want to a blaze of glory, man.
That's true.
It's so funny, man. So So along the way, you've created this platform for education. You wrote a book also called First Person, a Book in the Metaverse. Can you talk to me a little about the book and like what inspired that and what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah. So, I wrote that in 2019, late 2019. It's called The First Person. Really, what it's about is, this industry inspired me to write it, but it's more about the confluence of technologies and kind of how we are we're converging and with like AR, VR, AI, machine learning, kind of all of these very esoteric technologies are converging now, and we're merging physical reality with digital reality. So I wanted to kind of explore what that might look like, and I do touch a little bit. It's kind of a fun thing in the book about looking at Nick Bostrom's simulation probability and his anthropic principle, and are we living in a metaverse? Are we not? Are we recreating something? I mean, who really knows, right?
That's one of those questions. I know Elon Musk did the same type of things. Like, what's the likelihood that we live in base reality versus like, what are the chances not? And so it seems like the chances are we aren't, if there's a real matrix experience out there. So it gets really meta. The conversation is a very meta conversation. What are your whole take on now that, like, I mean, I know Mark Zuckerberg just came out with the Meta announcement, and Facebook at the last Connect, and got rid of the last Palmer Luckey naming conventions and all that fun stuff. What's your whole take on Facebook going meta, and what do you think it means for the industry?
Good question, man. I think first of all, they stole Meta from the at least the logo. They stole it from the Sense app. So in the VR, the whole that mindfulness app literally named Sense with the exact same logo. It's just a different color. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, what are you gonna do though? You're like, Facebook's has like, oh, please see floor number 37 filled with lawyers. They're gonna go. They'll take you one by one. It's like they got. So yeah, they did take the logo, but that what do you think about the name change? What do you think it means? It's really interesting.
I think I can tell you right now. I've been doing this for going on almost over 5 years now, and Facebook is not going to be the final arbiter of what is appropriate in the metaverse. No one's going to. I mean, look, I don't even have a Facebook account. None of my customers can even install Facebook on their computers. We've got over 7,000 institutions around the world that use us. And not a single one of them wants to use Oculus or Facebook. They're like not interested at all. So nobody, Facebook's going through a lot of bad press, and I don't think it's going to be the big bang that they're hoping for, even in the short or long term. I think it's going to be a lip quivering whimper, to be quite frank. I don't think anybody really wants to explore a metaverse that's owned by an advertising company, right? And I mean, and Facebook is not making any money on Oculus. They're long ways from making money on Oculus. They pay their bills through the advertising and the realities that they push through their other platforms. And I'll say, without getting, I mean, I could go on and on about this, but without getting too long-winded, Facebook isn't going to change anything. Meta is not going to change anything. I think what's going to happen is we're not going to see any real market traction in that space until Instagram and WhatsApp, which are also Facebook properties, become a very normal and ubiquitous part of our daily lives in the metaverse, and whatever iteration they kind of look like.
Yeah, see, that's really interesting because, like, if you look at them, I mean, they have the most popular hardware headset, and it's a loss leader for them. They lose money on the sales of the headset, but they make it accessible. But I think they do make money. I don't know how much money they make, because the actual Oculus store crushes. I mean, I know there's like 1 of the 3 games on there do like $1 million, and Beat Saber on that platform alone did over $100 million. So I mean, there's plenty of money being piped through. I mean, it's one of the most successful stores out there. At the same time, and because of the privacy issues and all the other, I find this to be so ironic. And I find it to be so funny that like I run like a Facebook group of VR developers and like Oculus VR people. And when I put up the question, I was like, hey, what do you think the new name should be for Facebook? And it was just as much hate as you could see just drop down this list of just, I don't think I saw one positive name. I find it really funny that people that use the hardware and then are also on the platform absolutely hate the provider. It's like people inside a bar yelling about how alcohol is terrible for them. It's just a really funny concept that I see going on because they provide a lot of value in terms of like having the platforms and stuff like that, but it's like these practices. And so it's a really weird conundrum because they are paving the way, but everyone's unhappy about it. So they're kind of a little like Apple, but not quite as much. Apple at least has got a lot of privacy things where they got your back on that front, which is nice. So it's a really interesting situation there. What do you?
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I think making the hardware accessible is a very good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not enough. It's a start. It's not enough. I mean, we're not going to see any sort of usage at scale until until companies like Facebook and Qualcomm and others, HTC and others, and this is the industry that I truly care about, until we go away from the face computer. And nobody wants to wear a face computer. The technology isn't there yet, and it's not going to be there for quite some time. And I truly do not believe Facebook is going to have any meaningful impact in this space. They're going to have impact, but not the impact that I think we need. I think what we all need to be very pragmatic about the realities in our industry. And I think the true impacts are going to come in 2022 and 2023 when Apple releases their HMD that they've patented, and when they release their AR glasses that they've patented, and they've said we're going to release in a year or two. Like we had, I consider Facebook the BlackBerry of smartphones, right? Like you know what I mean? Like we had BlackBerry, and we have the Oculus, but everybody I know uses these. I'm going to have very, very few friends that don't use an iPhone. I have friends that don't use an iPhone, but very few friends that don't use an iPhone. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh man, I miss my BlackBerry. You could actually feel the keys on them. I remember that back in the day. You're like, wow, I can type so fast. It's an interesting like connection between those two, because if you look at what Facebook's done, I mean, they've brought it to the masses. They've taken VR and they've made it mainstream, which no one else has been able to do so far. Valve's done it a bit. Valve was pretty solid. I kind of consider it to be kind of like Nintendo and Sega going at it, like who's going to win out in this space. And I'm really, really curious for Apple, because Apple's been very good. Like when they had Steve Jobs, like if Steve Jobs was still around, I would be very, very nervous for Facebook, because Steve Jobs' ability to innovate and come out with these quantum leaps in technology was the most mind-blowing thing I've ever seen. Like, he really birthed these new things with the iPad and all this stuff. So the only thing I've seen though of Apple is that they don't do major iterations. They do monetary, like they do like micro improvements, like a watch, a slightly better watch, a slightly better watch, earphones, slightly better earphones, like this. I haven't seen like a gigantic, like defining paradigm shifting jump. And so I'm curious to see, and I've seen with the hype of Magic Leap and all the razzle dazzle that those guys came out with of we're going to make the next headset. And they got what, $1.5 billion or something like that. And they just, the AR piece is such a difficult nut. Now, the thing is, Apple could sneeze at $1.5 billion and not bat an eye. So they've got the resources to back it. So I'm curious. I don't know if it'll be next year, but those would be, I think, the only ones that could completely shut down Facebook would be Apple. It's a really interesting thought,
Yeah, I don't think Facebook's going to get shut down in our lifetime. I don't think it will get shut down. I think Facebook is here to stay. It's going to iterate. It'll continue to improve. But there's no doubt that Mark Zuckerberg is not a visionary. He didn't even invent Facebook. I mean, he's kind of like we have visionaries in the technology space, like Elon Musk. I think is a true visionary, although he didn't even invent Tesla. He Facebooked, he Mark Zuckerberg his way into Tesla. There were other founders that founded Tesla. A lot of people don't know that. It's not his baby, but he's a visionary. And we need visionaries, and Apple being run by basically an accountant. How many accountants first of all, how many parties have you been to that are thrown by accountants? Number one, right? So you know what I mean. So we're not in, at least in the U.S. anyway. We are not we're far from mainstream adoption of our technologies. China's a different story. But I speak fluent Cantonese. I've got friends who are Chinese Americans. I've got many friends in Shenzhen, Beijing, Guangzhou. They are not going to tell you that. They'll be honest with you. They will tell you, look, even though China has far more adoption of XR technologies than America, still very far away from being mainstream. So I'm not sure it even relies on a visionary anymore. Like you made a very, very good point about the quantitative continuous or the continuous improvements that have happened at Apple. Nothing exciting. That's going to happen in our industry until we have some sort of game-changing moment. And I don't think that game-changing moment is even going to be in the hardware. It's going to be in content. I truly believe it's going to be in content, and that content is going to drive hardware, new iterations of exciting hardware. But people are working on all of it. It's good.
So you're saying kind of like you're waiting for like the Pokemon Go for the VR world. You're waiting for that thing that everyone gets crazy about, that kind of blows up the space. And what's your definition when we talk about mainstream? Because I think there's like probably 10 million headsets out there or so, like right now. And I've been in the space probably about, I was one of the original backers of Oculus, all that fun stuff. So when the headset came in, and I remember taking around. Yeah, right. You take it around. Yep. Anybody try this? Nobody tried it. Now more hands go up that they've said, I've tried something, right? And which is great. What do you think is when we say like mainstream? Like, what do you think is like? How many people do you need to have the headset or the XR technology in order for it to be mainstream?
I think it may not be a number. Well, I can tell you it's not a number I'm looking for. And I'll explain why that is in a second. But for me, mainstream doesn't mean like 10 million, 30 million, 100 million. For me, mainstream means when I don't need to ask the question, is it mainstream? It just is, right? Instagram, right? Instagram for sure is quote unquote mainstream. I don't think anyone really saw it becoming mainstream. What we saw was it got installed on phones, and then we installed. But what we saw was the content. We saw people taking selfies, and now we have whole industries of human beings who make their living on Instagram. Right now, they may not have any marketable skills if Instagram was to suddenly go away, right? Hey, I can take great selfies of myself, in exotic locales. Well, I can't really hire you for that, but maybe one or two people, but not a whole hordes of people. But the way I operate a business is I'm not consistently pursuing off the charts growth. So I don't even pay attention to like 30 million, 20 million, whatever. I pursue consistent year over year on the charts growth. And I think that is mainstream. When something is just as consistent as Coca-Cola, it's mainstream.
Yeah. And Coca-Cola took a while to be around, and they're still, they are inundated. Now the young and cupping, the Bing energy drinks or the other ones that are out there and stuff like that, everyone's now fighting for that market domination, which is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
In terms of like the metaverse, what do you think are some threshold guardians? What are some things that are preventing that from taking off? Like, what are the things that are stopping that from growing?
Man, that is a very, 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 very good question. A lot of people don't even ask me that question. Like, what's stopping it? My answer is high bandwidth, low latency. It's high bandwidth is the reason for that is because the world is very big and the world is very small, right? So the internet did a lot to drive globalization, where disparate communities, disparate people can kind of connect from all over the world, right? We can talk to someone in Spain, like right now, if we want to just pop them up, join them, and they can join us in this call. But it's still, to this day, it's still hard to call someone in Guyana or Darfur or somewhere, right? Or even certain places in India where there's dramatically more mobile phone usage than anything else. But there are still pockets that lack high bandwidth, low latency. 5G is going to help with that, places like there's still places in America, like the neighborhood I grew up in, there's still people where I grew up that cannot afford an Oculus, and these people live in America, so they can't afford internet. That's my neighborhood has not changed since the early 80s. Hasn't changed at all. Still cannot. There's people that still don't have televisions, and this is in South Central Phoenix, Arizona. I'm not talking about some third world country on the other side of the planet. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to see we're going to see a lot of disparate usage of our technology because those people can't afford it. People like you and I can, and we're passionate about it. But because we can, we are going to be the people that drive that adoption and make it. Then the prices will drop and they'll become more ubiquitous and technology. But I really don't think it's going to happen until we have truly high bandwidth and low latency, which doesn't exist. I know that Musk is working on that with Starlink, I believe.
Starlink,
that satellite technology still isn't there yet. It will get there, but we've got a lot of barriers to hit. So until that changes, I think what's going to happen is we're going to see adoption with 5G technologies, and we're going to see some good content developers build something interesting in this space, making reference back to the Pokemon Go that you mentioned before.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you look at like cell phone and how popular. I mean, I've been in a lot of countries in the world, I've been in a couple of them, and in these very rural places, you see people just pull out a smartphone, and they're like at a village, and they pull out a smartphone, and they're just in the middle of the jungle. They pull out a smartphone. It's a really interesting thing to see how common that is right now, and they don't have that. You don't have that exact same type of service with the headsets yet that are out there. Although the headsets are really, they're cheaper, if not cheaper than phones. What I think is crazy is that there's this thing that you can mostly have a little screen that you can type on and you can listen, and that's more expensive than an immersive VR experience that you put on and you wrap around your face. Like, I think that's a crazy concept to think of, and it shows you how much the markup is of the phone industry, that they can charge that much above and beyond when there's so much more advanced tech offered at a low price. And you can see it's kind of like a springboard that will allow people to kind of get into the space because of it's like, well, which one do you want to have? I could have it, it has to make economical sense, where if someone said, okay, well, I can't have a computer, so instead I'm going to have this computer on my face, and it's going to now be a monitor and be all these other things. It's got to get to that point where people they use it because it's practical, not because it's a gimmick, right? And that's that thing that's they're still waiting to see.
It really goes back to that. That is such a good point. It goes back to that old saying, necessity is the mother of invention, right? Like, we don't need HMDs. We have smartphones. I think we need smartphones now. I truly do. But we don't need an HMD. Now, an HMD really is an Android phone on your face. Quite frankly, that's really kind of what it is. But and it's a hell of a lot cheaper than that. And quite frankly, an Oculus Go is still a great option right now. You can get one for like $100, $99. It's $3 but it still does a lot of the things that people really need to do in the metaverse. But but again, we've got the face computer problem. They're hot, batteries don't last. Battery life is not great. But that's going to get solved. I'm not worried about that. I'm not here to poo-poo the industry. I'm just here to say, like, we need to be very realistic with the hype cycle, and we need to be very, very realistic with kind of how this industry is growing. It's not spiking. We're on a steady incline.
Well, I mean, I guess when you're talking about that, I mean, looking at what 4 years ago, I mean, there's barely any heads. I mean, if we went like what last year was like 1 million, now we're at like 10 million. I mean, you're kind of going up that cycle. I mean, going from, I mean, we're what more than 10xing every year with the amount of headsets that are available. So I mean, it's going up in this direction. I mean, there was from Quest 1 to Quest 2, it was better hardware, cheaper, faster. And so I mean that caused that big jump. Now, will they be able to do that again? No. Like, you're not going to be able to repeatedly get that system going along, but we are getting that spike. I mean, I've just seen it like when you give someone the headset for the first time and you gave them the old Vive and you're like, wow, this is incredible. You're like, yeah, you got to buy a $2,000 computer. You got to spend $1,200 on the part. Then you got to set up this thing. After about 45 minutes, you get the thing calibrated. You're going to be ready to go. And they go, oh, well, that's great. Thank you. And they're like, here's your crazy computer device. Versus you put like a cheap headset on them and their minds get blown. They're like, oh yeah, Amazon, click a button at your house tomorrow. They're like, oh wow. And I've just seen so many people buy it from that, going from like maybe 1 out of 20 people to being like 3 out of 5 people, especially if you have kids. So it is jumping, but it's not everywhere. It's only, I am blessed to live in an area that is more affluent than a lot of people, and so I'm definitely insulated in this type of environment versus if I go to other places, especially more rural, they've never even seen the headset. So I do have to be aware of that kind of, I'm in a little pocket of my own reality. So
yeah, it's interesting. It's we had that same experience. So we donated, we partnered with HTC. And this is a while back. We donated our rumii platform along with some computers and HTC Vives to a school in Africa. And
that's cool.
Yeah, and it was really interesting. So we had that, and I've had that experience all over the world, as I travel and speak. But that's what you just mentioned. But that was the first time, honestly, that I ever had that experience. And it was quite a dramatic experience where these kids in Africa on literally a small island that floods when high tide comes in and then high tide goes out and the island reappears and that's where they go to school. They had these vibes. But what was interesting is that they actually, first of all, a lot of them hadn't even seen a computer. They had seen phones, but not a computer, like a laptop computer.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is that they required virtually zero training. These kids just mobbed the computer. They mobbed the Vives, and they just figured it out. Just figured it out. The adults are there trying to show them how to use it, looking like idiots, kind of tripping over their words, and they just stopped. And the kids just kind of got in there and played. And I've seen that happen over and over and over and over again with the new experiences. The biggest issue, though, was not necessarily bandwidth, because they were on satellite technology. It was electricity. So, just consistent, reliable electricity. But anyway, those problems have existed long before we came onto the scene. They're probably going to exist, unfortunately, long after you and I expire. Just in places in the world. But what gave me a lot of hope for our industry was not the big behemoths of the world producing this technology and this content. It was these kids just taking to the technology and exploring the content on their own, because we know in those areas and in areas all over the world, there are Einsteins that exist, right? There are Mary Curies that exist, and they just don't have access to this technology. So that's why I say high bandwidth, low latency. Once we make that happen, boom, we're going to see a watershed moment happen in our industry and all over the world.
And that's one of the things I think is beautiful about Elon Musk doing that whole Skylink, is that all of a sudden, or Starlink, is the fact that the way that the satellite system's set up, right, is that in highly dense so there's like a band, almost like if you were to shoot a laser beam that's got so much information. So like in a high density population, like an urban city, you don't get much, right? It kind of works, but it's okay. But in giant rural areas where you're like the one dude who's on Tinder trying to find that chick, right, who's 40 miles away from you and you're swiping, you're gonna get an amazing connection. And that's the thing, is like, it's weird to think like my grandma, who's 92 years old, has never been on the internet. She's never been on it. She doesn't understand it. She doesn't get it. And it's crazy to think that there's people alive today that have never been on the internet, versus you take my niece who's like 7 and you take her internet away. Oh, it's like it is over. The world is over. So I can't imagine, like, once everybody becomes connected, it's like our global brain power will just kind of ramp up a won't, because now we have access to all those amazing minds around the planet, because you get the Elon Musk from Kenya or whoever it might be, and that's a really, really powerful thing. Let me ask you, what have you seen, like, in terms of like what's your greatest like hope for the metaverse? Like, what would you like to see if you could like wave a magic wand and make the metaverse however you want it to look like? What would that look like for you?
Yeah, that's interesting. I would say, if I could just kind of wave my magic wand right now,
Yeah.
what I would do is I would completely destroy. I would just completely get rid of all face computers. First of all, we and we're getting there.
Yeah.
For me, it's more digital light field technologies. Number one. So there's a few phases for me.
Okay.
There's no look. I already wear these to see.
Yeah.
I don't want to wear a face computer. I don't even want to wear Apple glasses, Google glasses. I want to wear these glasses because I can see, I can read with them, right? I don't want that. Ideally, if I could use anything, it would be like a badge, that I wear over my, or whatever, something I clip, or a necklace that projects a digital light field in front of my face. And that can transport me to a shared environment, So first of all, from a technological point of view, we have to get there. I really, really believe we're not going to get there. I mean, look, on Star Trek, nobody's throwing on a headset, right? And everything in Star Trek came true. That's how I know for a fact you and I are doing the right thing. This is going to be a reality.
Yeah.
Cell phones on Star Trek, the communicators, the pads, the iPads on communicators, on Star Trek, the holodeck. We're already creating the holodeck. It's not there yet. It's almost there. So once we get into more digital light field technology, with high bandwidth, low latency, we'll start seeing these shared spaces, and we'll start sharing these spaces more ubiquitously. But also, I would like to see the metaverse become a very normal part of our daily lives. Like, I want to wake up with it, I want to use it every day, and I want to fall asleep to it, right? I want to go to school in the metaverse. I don't think anyone's going to, and we're already stopping this practice, but I don't think anyone's going to hop in their car and drive, to work or school. Like, we're simply going to attend work and school. And we're already kind of doing that right now. And the pandemic was a big part of that. So I would like to see, better content, better technology, just better use cases that are going to help us connect to each other and make the world smaller.
See, that's really, I mean, what you're talking about, I mean, looking at that, you're saying no face computers. One of the things I'm looking at is like, what's the difference between the internet, like what we're like doing now, and the metaverse for you? Like, what's different for you?
Yeah, so it's not immersive. First of all, this is flat. This is very, very flat. Like, I can see you in this direction. So it's I gave a talk. I'll say it this way. I gave a talk today at a 3-letter government agency, in a private chat. It was I can tell you who the agency was, but you can't see the talk. But it was with the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, not the CIA, the DIA. And they gave a talk today about what we are currently doing to support tactical warfighter communications at the front end, the front edge, kind of what they call the spear's edge or the leading edge of warfighter communication, which we do a lot of work in here with Rumii, in addition to all the other things we do. But they didn't ask me that question, but I did present it as kind of, hey, this is how I see the difference between real world and the digital, the metaverse. So right now there's a lack of in this experience right now, there's a lack of 360-degree information, right? Like I can see you, it's flat, but I don't have anything that's spatial, right? I've got these headphones that are spatial. They've got right and left channels. But when I'm in the metaverse, I'm fully immersed, right? In like if I'm in Rumii, I'm fully immersed. And you know that, like you can look around and see everything, and you can experience it. And really what that means for me is more than connection, because we can create a meaningful connection. I see it happen over and over and over again in our shared Rumii spaces. It's unity. It's unity. When I can truly feel a unification between you and me, then in a shared virtual space that feels real, that's what the metaverse means to me. And right now, this feels good and it's important, but it doesn't, and it's real. It doesn't feel real, right? There's nothing haptic about it. So.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing I was trying to understand, because you're talking about not wearing a face computer, but wanting to feel immersive, and so that's the chasm I'm trying to cross on that one. Is how do you feel immersive, and also like we have a natural inputs. Like this is a natural input. This is a natural input, right? There's some interesting natural inputs that we have that we don't really fully like if you don't have a face computer on, it's very difficult to be immersed and hijack what you're seeing. And like, cause if you hear a sound, behind you, do that. Like that's what you do, right? When you hear a sound. So I'm trying to cross the chasm in my brain of how do you actually, if you don't have a face computer on, how do you put someone into a reality that they can experience that is that the case? And so I haven't tried, I've heard of the light field technology. I think there's companies like a toy from a while back. But I'm not super familiar. Like I'd be very curious what that would be like.
Yeah, well, so Google is working on. You can Google working on this, but they're working on digital light field technology. I think they're going to be the far and away leader in this. But in order to be immersed without a face computer, and face computers have to exist. They're the rotary phones of the metaverse, right? Like can't get there without them. But we're gonna have digital light fields that create a space around us, and we'll probably end up using ultrasound waves where I can reach out and feel something. It'll make my fingers tingle, and that will be haptic without having to wear a $5,000 or $10,000 haptic glove. And a backpack with batteries and all of that. Like the walls will be in my room will be painted with some sort of digital paint skin that will create an immersive environment that I can change at any time. The Wi-Fi signals in my house will be maybe overlaid with a some sort of ultrasonic waves that I can feel when I reach out, and that will be interesting. And my whole point here is this: we're approaching the metaverse. We're actually not even there yet. We're very, very far away from being there because we are still bound by Newtonian laws of physics, right? In the metaverse, we are unbound. We're completely and totally unbound. I am not bound by Newtonian laws of physics. But the problem is when I pop into, and I understand we have to do this so that people can cognitively process these spaces right now and kind of get used to them. But when I pop into my rooms right now in Rumii, or really any room in any of the competition, pretty much all of them I know, the CEOs of these companies, or someone at these companies, we still have tables and chairs and fucking walls and shit, right? Like, why do I have that? I can be a spider and I can make the ceiling a work surface and I can just pop up there. We can be an MC Escher of productivity, but for some reason we're still building the metaverse as though it's bound by Newtonian laws of physics, and it's not.
Yeah, there's a comfortability in it There's like a
For sure.
there's like a halfway house, and because humans naturally gravitate in circles around objects.
Mhm.
Like that's what we do. What's a fire?
Yep.
What's a because that's the way that we normally. That's the way that it's a part of our social um, ecosystem. That's the way that we communicate. If we did all these things randomly and wacky, I mean, you can go into some of like VR chat rooms and you want to see crazy. Like get about 3 a.m. go inside one of those random spaces, and what you're talking about is pretty on point. Where there's just like all these random characters all over. It's just I get in there, I feel like I have to take a shower when I get out afterwards. I'm like, oh, what was that? I was like, I don't even know what that was. I'm just gonna wipe that off and just keep going about my day. But it's a thing. But I think you're right. We're getting there, and I think the more uh, we're starting to become the more we get comfortable with technology, the more we let go of the current way. I saw this one kid, I can't remember, but she was, I think it was my niece or somebody. She was trying to use a piece of paper like an iPad, where she wasn't swiping, and she didn't understand why wouldn't this be? I don't understand it. It's not moving the way it should. And you can tell, like the earlier you get them in, the more that they feel like they're more attached to that kind of reality versus old school pen and paper and stuff like that we grew up with. Because I remember back in the day before the internet was a thing.
Yeah.
So uh,
Yeah, it's interesting because like going back to what you said about fire, if I can interject,
yeah,
fire is only fire because it existed before we had fire, right? Like we didn't have fire before we had fire.
yeah.
It wasn't a thing. And now we have these things, which are basically like digital fire, right? Like, here's, you've seen the old movies where the guy goes back in time and he lights a lighter. Oh, everybody goes, oh, you can create fire, right? Like this didn't exist before. We went from burning fire and collecting around this. Now we have this. So you're right. Like we certainly have things that didn't exist in the world before we had them. And now they're just a ubiquitous part of our lives, like fire was, and fire still is. But you're right. We do need these things so that people can cognitively process the spaces that they're in, right? It can't be like a DMT trip and you're just like, what the fuck is going on? This is crazy. Like, can't be that. Like every VR or AR experience can't be like, drinking ayahuasca. You just can't have that. It's not going to work. But I am trying to challenge my industry to grow faster than it's growing, right? Because I want it desperately to be successful. And I see it doing a sine wave of success, failure, success, failure, success, failure, right? Like it's just not, it's like, it's gaining success in a lot of fits and starts. And I'm trying to challenge us to just like, look, let's all be, maybe we don't have the Steve Jobs of the metaverse yet, but why can't we all be the Steve Jobs of the metaverse? Let's just make it happen.
Yeah, I actually love that because we all have the ability, especially because like now with the technology and how easy it is to get up and running, like anybody can, it does feel like it's 1999 or it says like 1991. And we're like, hey, there's this thing coming. It's called the internet, and there's like a web browser, and like you could put your company on the website, and you could like connect with customers. And like, I don't understand what my building works great. What's your web browser for? I feel like that's where we're at. We're like this dawn of the metaverse, and I think that you're right. It's right now. Like, what advice would you give? There could be a young kid possibly listen to this, who wants to be the Steve Jobs of the metaverse, right? They love it. They tried it. They're at their older brother's 9-year-old birthday party, and they got to put on the headset for the first time, and their mind was blown, and they want to get into the space. What advice would you give to them?
Great question, man. That's a very, very good question. That's actually happened to me. So that has happened to me. I can tell you very proudly that did happen to me with a very, very good friend of mine who looks just like me. We're not brothers. Everybody thinks we're twin brothers, which is weird. We're not. We're probably digital twin brothers, and this is just a digital reality. I don't know, but his son, he was talking to me about what his son wanted to do in his life. So I talked to his son and gave him some advice. And I'll tell you the advice I gave him, but that was in 2016. He is now 18 years old, and he just got hired as Amazon's youngest full-time hire in Amazon history. And he is making, I won't say how much, but he's making a lot of money, right? And he's got no college degree, which is interesting. He's got a lot of marketable skills, but no college degree. He doesn't need one. He's one of those smart kids. But what I told him when he wanted to, he didn't know what VR was. He'd heard about it. I put him in his very first VR headset, gave him an HTC Vive, gave him an MSI laptop to play around with, ended up putting it at a school in Ballard, his high school, in the library, and just took off with it. But what I told him was this. I said, look, man, what you need to know about the metaverse when you're building it is there is no money in the metaverse. There's no money. People are making money. My company makes money. We have revenue, but you're not building Instagram. It's not Facebook. It's not this giant thing. It hasn't happened yet. There is no money in the metaverse. And actually, do not, if you want to start developing this, do not get into it, but do not pursue it to make money. What you should do is pursue it to build your passion. Pursue it as your passion. And the reason I told him that is because personal prosperity is born from happiness, right? It's not born from chasing down a dollar. If everybody was going to do that, look, if you're quick tangent, if all you did was chase a dollar, every millionaire you meet would tell you, I made my money by listening to Gary Vaynerchuk. I guarantee you're not going to run into any millionaires that say, I made my money by listening to Gary Vaynerchuk. It doesn't happen. It's not happening. There's no money in the metaverse, but there's money in the passion, right? So get in there, build something that you're passionate about, and build good content. So I truly, truly believe that's what he did. He started hackathons, started building good content. 5 years later, that content led to him being the earliest,
How old is
most successful. He's
how old? 18?
Well, he's almost 18.
Okay, so 17, he got hired by Amazon for VR specialist from doing a bunch of hackathons.
Well, he's not a VR specialist. He didn't get hired in VR, actually.
Okay.
But that is where he cut his teeth by doing 100%. That's where he cut his teeth. He did VR hackathons. He's a very bright kid, very hardworking. But I can tell you this much: he ain't the smartest kid I've ever met. He's a very smart kid, but he's certainly no genius. And that's a nice thing, is you don't need to be. So, but what he did was he focused on content. He didn't go chase the dollar. He didn't go chase a bunch of bullshit, that adults kind of tell kids to do. What he did is he chased his passion, and his passion was technology. And he built good, solid content for our industry. And while that didn't lead to a job in our industry, it did lead to a very comfortable living for him. And I can guarantee you this. He will most likely build something that is important to our industry in the metaverse. Mm-hmm. He's not working it right now. He's kind of working adjacent to it.
Yeah.
But that is where his passion lies. And a lot of us kind of have to take jobs that are outside of our passion so that we can feed that passion.
There's something that's so powerful in that statement too, because I've ran a number of VR hackathons, and I've seen people go from nothing to building a portfolio of work and then showing out that portfolio of work, because they don't care if you have a degree. No one cares. Mm-hmm. Degrees don't matter at all. They're like, what can you do for me? Show me that you can do things for me. And a degree means nothing. It means that you can show up on time, you can clock in, you can clock out. But that passion, because if you have the passion, you're going to go through that process and you're going to hone those skills till finally you stop and you look back. You're like, wow, my passion led me to a thing that I can now do it. And you're right, we're at the dawn of the space. If you make something you're passionate about and people can see that passion, you're going to hone it into a skill. And then you can take that and then bring that, because you're basically, more or less building your own town in the desert of the metaverse. There's nothing built around you yet, but you're just building your own little town, and the metaverse trains are coming. And then like when it's there, you're like, oh, I've been building this whole time. Look what I can do. And they're like, wow, I'm going to stop at your place and we're going to keep going, because it's born one useful application at a time. It's not like this whole swallow the whale, we're going to make this whole thing at once and come check this thing out. It's like, can you make something that brings you joy and then can bring someone else joy. Because if you can do that, then you can just expand that outwards, which is, I think that's a beautiful point.
Preach the word, my brother. I mean, amen to that. Seriously, like you said it. Because you're building something you're passionate about, that passion transfers to another human being. And what happens when that happens, when you transfer that passion, is you create a connection. And that's literally what our industry is all about, is creating a connection with other human beings. But we're doing it inside a shared virtual space, right? Whether that's AR, VR, whatever it kind of looks like. But we're sharing that connection with each other. That's why I said, like, for me, it all goes back to unification.
I love it, man. That's beautiful. So with that being said, is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before you tell them how they can get a hold of you?
Like right now, we are working on some very important use cases, but those important use cases are all for the U.S. Department of Defense, so I can't go into any detail about them in an open space. But what I would say is, we've been doing the same thing a lot of these companies have been doing in terms of like distributed instructor-led education. So, if you want to use us, you can, look for us online, Rumii, RUMII. We're free and open right now, so anybody can just use us. We're not charging for we used to charge. I'm not charging anymore, because since the pandemic, I just want to make it a free thing that people can use and help people connect. And we're doing pretty good throughout the U.S. federal workforce. But what I would say is, there's a lot of great resources online if people are listening and they want to pursue some sort of interest in this space. So check it out. HTC's got some really, really cool products. They've got really good things going on. Oculus and Facebook, honestly, like there's no doubting that the Oculus HMD, any iteration of the Oculus HMD, are phenomenal HMDs for you to use, and they're relatively inexpensive. So go get one. You don't need to get the latest and greatest. You can just get any generation, really, just to get your feet wet in it. Start learning Unity if you want to program. But what we really need is good content developers. We need way better UI. We need way better UX in our industry than we have, because it's people mostly by engineers right now. And Oculus, I know, is focusing on games just to kind of build that customer base and normalize the experiences, which I think is actually a good thing. But there's other HMD manufacturers out there that I'm a big fan of. So, like the Pico. Pico has great HMDs, 4K expandable memory. They're 6 degrees of freedom, rechargeable controllers. They're incredibly. They're great. So anyway, there's no end of resources out there. But the one thing I would like to tell everyone is something that you mentioned earlier, which is get educated. And education is far more valuable than a degree right now. Getting yourself educated is very different than getting a degree. If you want a college degree, go get one. They're great. I've got 3. But I did not make my success because I had a college degree. That happened years and years after I made my success. I made my success because I educated myself on how to program. So.
Yes, that is 100% true. I mean, so often it's not about the degree. It's about what you learn, and it's about actually learning something that is actually of value. And there is a whole world of metaverse to create in any space you want to go into, as long as you're building something of value and you enjoy that process. There's 100% agree on that, and I think it's beautiful. So with that, Matt, how do people get a hold of you if they do want to get a hold of you?
Right now, best way to get a hold of me is, I know this is going to be the douchiest thing I say all year, but you can Google my name. I'm all over the internet. Yeah. You just type in Matt Chacon. I spell my name with 1 T, like yoga mat. So MATCHACON. You can find me on LinkedIn. by searching me, Matt Chacon. And you can also find me on Twitter. I'm very, very active on Twitter. And my Twitter handle is @theVRCEO.
At the VRCO. Look at that. Claim that title. Love it. All right, Matt, thank you very much, brother. I appreciate you talking and chatting with me, all things around the metaverse and getting educated and understanding the space. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. And I will see you in another reality.
Right on. Thanks, Dylan. Cheers, bud. Bye.
Cheers, brother. Bye now. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening.